This may be hard to believe, but we are on the last section of Module 3 on U.S. export compliance. It's Section 37, and the title is The Screening of Export Transactions. With this being the last section, let's be sure to finish up strong so we can move on to take our quiz and then move into the more operational components of the MES, starting with air exports. The screening of export transactions. We've actually talked about this on a number of occasions throughout the most recent slides. As a part of the overall export compliance process, and in addition to agency-specific requirements like OFAC, U.S. exporters must constantly be screening transactions. This is simply a reiteration of what we've been saying all along. The screening of transactions doesn't come at the end of a sales cycle, right before goods are going to be shipped. It has to be throughout the entire sales cycle, the entire transaction from beginning to end. As we've mentioned previously, restricted party screening, RPS, is the process through which exporters vet companies, entities, or persons that can potentially appear on lists of parties of concern. We saw this sub-bullet point before as well. It is part of the Know Your Customer approach. As a best practice, let's start this slide by saying, by using third-party software solutions or government-provided lists, exporters should engage in restricted party screening throughout the life of an export transaction. We're starting to hit that broken record level of emphasis, but it's true. There are third-party software solutions, they have a cost associated with them, to screen multiple lists, but there are government-provided lists as well. We're not here to say which one is better or if even one is better than the other. Having knowledge of third-party software solutions and the government-provided lists will put U.S. exporters in a much better position to engage in screening throughout the life of a transaction. Second bullet point, in the event that a company, entity, or person on one of the upcoming lists, we're going to talk about many of them, appears to match a party in an export transaction, additional due diligence is required and may result in an export not taking place. Depending on which list, and there are indeed many, a match was found, it will indicate if there is a strict export prohibition, as in no exports can take place under these circumstances, if there is a specific license requirement, or if there is a presence of a red flag, things that we should be looking out for. Another best practice, in the event of a hit, meaning the screening process brought back information that requires us to engage in more due diligence, consult the requirements of the specific list by reviewing the site of the agency responsible for the list. We're going to state the lists and what agencies are responsible for them. Let's talk about the consolidated screening list, a very important tool, because as one can imagine, there are many, many lists, and theoretically, an exporter could spend a lot of time going through each individual list. Manually, from website to website, there is a tool out there that consolidates the primary lists and provides a single source to engage in screening. It's called the Consolidated Screening List. The Consolidated Screening List identifies companies, entities, and/or parties that are subject to restrictions on exports, re-exports, or transfers of items. It's a tool. It's an online tool provided by the U.S. government, and it is found actually on export.gov. The Consolidated Screening List, last bullet point, vets parties to export transactions across multiple lists from BIS, OFAC, and the Department of State. It's a single source to be screening transactions across multiple lists in a single place. This is the export.gov landing page for the Consolidated Screening List, and we see the logos of State, Commerce, and the Treasury. What's it say? The Consolidated Screening List is a list of parties for which the United States government maintains restrictions on certain exports, re-exports, or transfer of items. We just saw that on one of our bullet points. Below, under Tools, are links to the CSL search engine, downloadable files, application programming interface, all the tools that one needs to utilize this really great tool. These tools may be used as an aid to industry in conducting electronic screens of potential parties to regulated transactions. Note they say potential parties, meaning that transactions should not have been solidified and goods ready to be shipped without having previously gone through a screening process. pre-sale, sale, and even post-sale environments. That's why they're saying there, electronic screens of potential parties. In the event that a company, entity, or person on the list appears to match a party potentially involved in your export transaction, additional due diligence should be conducted. Prior to taking further action, the user must check the official publication of restricted parties, there it is again, in the Federal Register, or the official lists of restricted parties maintained on the websites of Commerce, Treasury, and DDTC. This is a consolidated site through which an exporter can screen the parties to a potential transaction in one place. Pretty significant tool. Moving along, should a company, entity, or party appear on the consolidated screening list, there may be a prohibition, need for a license application, or an evaluation of the end user. All of the things that we've talked about for 360 odd slides. As we said and observed in the previous slide, the exporter must then consult the Federal Register for official lists or the list maintained by BIS, DDTC, OFAC, and others. We're now looking at the most common lists found on the CSL, but by government agency. Lists maintained by specific agencies, beginning with the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security. There's a denied person list, individuals and entities that have been denied export privileges. The unverified list, end users who BIS has not been able to identify in past transactions. They don't know who they are. An entity list, parties whose presence in a transaction that may trigger a license requirement. Department of State, BIS, and non-proliferation. The non-proliferation sanctions, a list of parties that have been sanctioned under various statutes. Here's one strictly from the Department of State, DDTC. The AECA debarred list. That's the Arms Export Control Act debarred list. Entities and individuals prohibited from participating directly or indirectly in the export of defense articles, including technical data and defense services. That's a DDTC list. But it can be screened by using the consolidated screening list, as can the others that we've listed. Treasury, specially designated nationals list. Parties who may be prohibited from export transactions based on OFAC regulations. We talked about that a couple of times. We also talked about the foreign sanctions evaders list. Foreign entities and individuals that have violated, attempted to violate, conspired to violate, or caused a violation related to sanctions on Syria or Iran, as well as foreign persons who have facilitated such actions on behalf of others. This is a Treasury list. It's an OFAC list. Some more Treasury. Sectoral sanctions identification list. Individuals operating in sectors of the Russian economy, we talked about this, oil and gas, energy, with whom U.S. persons are prohibited from providing financing longer than 90 days. Palestinian Legislative Council list. Individuals of the PLC who were elected on the party slate of Hamas or any other foreign terrorist organization, specially designated terrorist or specially designated global terrorist. That's not a good list. None of these are good, but that one sounds especially not good. These are Treasury lists that can be screened through the consolidated screening list. A few more from Treasury. The Part 561 list. List of names of foreign financial institutions that are subject to sanctions, certain prohibitions, or strict conditions before a U.S. company may do business with them. Non-SDN Iranian Sanctions Act list. Persons determined to have made certain investments in Iran's energy sector or to have engaged in certain activities related to Iran's refined petroleum sector. As we go through these lists, one can see just how specific and targeted the lists are. How much easier is it to screen through all of these lists by using the consolidated screening list? It's hard to measure. It makes things a lot easier. Let's stop and talk about the specially designated nationals and blocked persons list, one that we have mentioned on a number of occasions now. What is it? The SDN, a list of individuals and companies owned or controlled by or acting for or on behalf of targeted countries. The SDN also lists individuals, actual people, groups and entities like terrorists and narcotics traffickers, under programs that are not country specific. This is an important distinction to be made because terrorists, although everybody is born somewhere, narcotics traffickers are born somewhere, their activities aren't limited to a specific country. So the approach has to transcend traditional geographic borders, traditional sovereign states, and put the United States government in a better position to vet out terrorists and narcotics traffickers who call no place home. That's an important component of the SDN list. Second sub-bullet point, the assets of persons on this list are blocked, and U.S. persons are generally prohibited from dealing with them. As a trade tip, and one might imagine, this is OFAC's biggest list with over 6,000 names on it. There's a lot of bad people out there. My goodness, this must be a slide that makes people especially happy. It's the objectives of Module 3 that we showed at the very beginning, some 360 slides ago. This means that we're finished with Module 3. Well, almost finished. You still have to take your quiz. But let's summarize, and only you can judge, really, if we achieve the objectives of Module 3. First, we wanted to provide students with a master-level understanding of the government agencies, legislation, regulations, and operational requirements associated with U.S. export trade compliance. Hopefully you feel that we did. Second, we wanted to elevate the participants' understanding of each facet of the export compliance discipline, from ITAR to the EAR to sanctions, embargoes, license application processes, all of the resources that are out there to vet potential customers. We hope that we were able to do that too. Provide tools that help U.S. exporters to develop comprehensive compliance programs. Hopefully, just the resources alone that we've provided, all the links, all of the screenshots, all of the hopefully vast amount of information we provided helps to achieve this objective. And then in the end, make compliance an integral part of the U.S. exporter's value proposition. Because the reality is really quite simple. If U.S. exporters don't comply with the U.S. export regulations that apply to their specific products and or services, they're not exporting anyway. So it's in the benefit of the company. It should become part of the value proposition and use it to a company's advantage to attract customers overseas by saying, we follow the rules, we understand the rules, and when we ship to you, things are going to work right because our homework will have been done. That's an important objective too. With that, congratulations on almost completing a quite lengthy module, 365 odd slides, not an easy task. Take your quiz, study hard, you'll do well. From there, we're going to move on to more operational aspects, the logistics of air exports, the logistics of ocean exports, NAFTA, and all the way through Module 10. You've accomplished a great deal in this module. Congrats and good luck on the quiz.